Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and I want to start off with an apology. It's my fault this video got delayed, and there really is no good reason why it should have gotten delayed this long, but I will tell you it originally started out as a more ambitious project that was going to be a review of the top 15 worst episodes of SpongeBob voted by you guys, but that didn't happen. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the worst episode of SpongeBob Rant, and hopefully after this we're just going to push forward with more new content. It should surprise no one that this episode was, of course, the Splinter, which, personally, is not my least favorite episode. I'm gonna save that for the next rant. But this episode is painful. It is really, really painful. And I don't mean acting-wise, I mean they go through great lengths to show you how painful this Splinter is, in a way that no over-the-top cartoon antics can even describe. It is so downright realistic in, Splinterness, that it's just, there's no refuge in audacity, and what I mean by that is, in cartoon violence, you see someone get dropped off of a cliff and flattened by a steamroller. That's funny. That's not painful to you because you've never experienced what that would be like. You'd be dead if you did. And, it's not even something that's relatable. But this, getting a splinter and not being able to get it out, no matter how hard you try, is a very real pain that a lot of people have experienced, and especially for someone like me who's terrified of needles and sharp objects, to see it be portrayed by SpongeBob is just so agonizing that it couldn't have been more painful if it had been live action and we had got to see him bleed. It's just, ugh. So the episode starts off with SpongeBob being really annoying about his job, and through some sort of complicated series of events, it ends with him almost falling on a bunch of blades. So after narrowly avoiding that scrape with death, SpongeBob, in slow motion, slips and gets a splinter jammed into his thumb. And then he's just smiling about it. SpongeBob takes everything positively. He's just like, oh, it's a splinter? Okay, gotta go. And he starts pulling it out, and as he does, he slowly realizes that he can't get this thing out no matter how hard he tries. You can see him sweating, you can see him grunting, you can see him crying at how painful this thing is and his frustration in not being able to get it out. Do the writers think this is funny? I mean, look, I have my differences with SpongeBob, and I don't like what happened to him in later seasons. I downright even hate the Sponge nowadays, but still, seeing him in such agony, seeing such a beloved children's character in such pain, and not for unrealistic cartoony means, just for the very realism of having a splinter, is just painful to watch. He then goes through a few quote-unquote comical ways to try and trick the splinter out, like, look, a bald eagle with a mustache, and tries to rip the splinter out, only to rip off his skin, sponge, whatever you want to call it. He's left exposed bony head, and when I say bony head, I don't mean, just like bones, I mean like cracked skeleton, which, by the way, sponges don't have, and they made that joke in a lot of earlier episodes, and that was part of the joke in a lot of things. I feel like writers have just kind of forgotten the fact that he's a sponge and he lives underwater nowadays, but that's a completely different issue. Point is, it just adds another layer of grossness to have his skin peeled off as a result of this. SpongeBob, adopting again that positive attitude that he seems to have just completely dropped there as he experienced horrific pain, decides to go about his day as if he didn't have the splinter and starts flipping Krabby Patties with his nose, and then Squidward gets pissed at him, and then he explains to Squidward what was going on, and then he shows Squidward the splinter, which is now oozing pus, and some of the pus drips into Squidward's eye. Why is it that cartoons aren't allowed to show blood, but they are allowed to show disgusting pus oozing off of a gross boil on his finger caused by an infection caused by a gross splinter? So the episode, finally deciding to have a plot outside of just SpongeBob being in agonizing pain, decides that Squidward doesn't want SpongeBob at work because he's an annoyance, so he tells him that Mr. Krabs is going to send him home early if SpongeBob doesn't take care of that injury. SpongeBob calls Patrick in a nice nod to the episode's suds, when SpongeBob did the same, and Patrick becomes a doctor to help SpongeBob out. So in a joke, Patrick completely ignores SpongeBob's splinter and starts sucking on his foot. This seems funny at first, that, just Patrick's just randomly sucking on SpongeBob's foot, but then it gets, really, really awkward. The scene goes on for way too long, Patrick's increasingly grotesque ways of sucking on SpongeBob's foot and massaging it with his tongue get way, way, way too descriptive, and please, if the Splinter wasn't in this episode, trust me, this would be the most disgusting thing here, because Patrick is, like, making out with SpongeBob's foot. This is a foot fetish right here. Patrick has a foot fetish in a SpongeBob episode, and I don't even know what to say, because what? Is this trying to distract me from all the horrific pain that SpongeBob experienced by Patrick pleasuring his toes? I mean, sure, SpongeBob isn't getting happy by this, but Patrick seems to really be enjoying himself and just vigorously doing this, and I let's just move on. So after sucking on SpongeBob's foot, after SpongeBob gets so mad he makes him stop, Patrick gets angry and starts getting really, really angry at SpongeBob, protesting that he's a doctor, so he knows what's best. Is Patrick, like, disguising himself as a doctor in order to molest SpongeBob's feet? I really hate to be asking this question, because I don't think this is what was the worst part of the episode, but you know what? Maybe it is. Seriously, you watch that scene, and you tell me it doesn't look like a doctor, you know, a not doctor actually, passing himself off as a doctor and getting indignant at someone implying that he's not a doctor just to get away with his weird fetishes. Okay, moving on, for real this time. After Patrick refuses to help SpongeBob, SpongeBob starts crying and begging Patrick to help him no matter what the cost. Okay, alright, just one more time. This scene, not right. Just not right. Okay, so we get a transition of probably Patrick sucking on SpongeBob's foot for like 5 hours before finally deciding to help him with the Splinter. And we're back from the creepy scenes to get to the painful scenes. Patrick's method of helping SpongeBob is by getting a stake and a hammer and slowly preparing himself, winding up the aim, because you know it's coming. You know he's just gonna hammer that stake into SpongeBob's Splinter and dig it down deeper. You know it's coming. They decide to use this comedic timing, or what I should say is timing that should be reserved for comedy, to make you anticipate when the pain is going to happen, and it is seriously uncomfortable. He hits SpongeBob's pus-filled thing, and it just swells up. His thumb just swells up and becomes red and disgusting and infected and gross, and I really want to stop watching the episode at this point, but nope, I can't. You guys are making me watch it. I gotta keep going. Patrick decides to put a garbage compress on it to make the swelling go down, and SpongeBob's thumb gets super infected and turns green and just, like, squirts pus, and it is seriously disgusting. Gah, I haven't seen this episode in a long time. I had seriously forgotten it got this bad. There is nothing funny about this episode. I mean, look, I know SpongeBob's been known to do gross-out humor. There's nothing wrong with it. Nasty Patty is one of my favorite episodes ever, and that had the gross-up shot of the Nasty Patty, murdering someone, showing a supposedly dead body, and all that was gross-out and dark, but it was funny. It was in the name of comedy. This is just in the name of making the audience as uncomfortable as they could possibly be. Patrick then leaves SpongeBob, telling him that he should call him in the morning if SpongeBob can still dial a phone, which I would like to think is a nice callback to that Suds episode I mentioned earlier, but no, neither of these were callbacks. They would be callbacks if this show was better written. They would be callbacks if these were the good writers on the show mentioning them. No, this is just people who don't know how to write SpongeBob just writing random crap, making Patrick really unsympathetic and mean to the point where he not only, ignored SpongeBob's problem at first, but he made it worse, and he molested SpongeBob, and this show is awful, and I wish it had died after season 4. I really do. This show is nothing like what seasons 1 through 3 and some of 4 were like. I'm dismissing it as a different series after the movie. It does not count. This is not SpongeBob continuity. This is ScumBob. You're watching ScumBob SquarePants. This is what we're watching. So, through shenanigans, Mr. Krabs finds out about ScumBob Splinter, which, mind you, his thumb at this point has a disgustingly pulsating vein, and it's red, and there's green pus all at the top of it, and it's gross, man. It is gross. Mr. Krabs decides to help him out, which seems pretty uncharacteristic of Mr. Krabs, you know? He's very greedy and doesn't care about anyone, because this is SpongeBob. Anyway, he goes to remove it, and dramatic music plays, and what happens? Well, confetti pops out of SpongeBob's thumb, and a nice subversion of what you'd expect. Oh, wait, no. After that, a bunch of disgusting green goo goes squirting at Mr. Krabs. Hooray! I want to barf. Mr. Krabs is relieved that SpongeBob Splinter is gone, because if it wasn't, he'd have to pay him workers' compensation, which, according to Mr. Krabs, means that if you get hurt on the job, you can sit at home and get paid. Now, you might be wondering why they would bring up this weird term that has to do with jobs and stuff in a SpongeBob episode, but you gotta remember, this isn't a SpongeBob episode, this is a ScumBob episode. So, mentioning this weird term that only adults would really understand is not, you know, beyond the realm of possibility. So, in keeping with this being the ScumBob universe, Squidward then grabs a cash register and bashes his skull in the name of getting workers' comp. But oh no, it didn't work, because as Mr. Krabs tells him, his shift ended 2 minutes ago. Ha ha ha. Wait, that's not funny, that's horrible. This guy just mutilated himself so he could get money by doing nothing, and it was all for nothing anyway. This episode is truly awful. It has SpongeBob being annoying, being in horrific pain, it has gross-out imagery, it has violence with Squidward's random psychopathic outburst at the end there, it has characters doing horrible things to each other. Look at what Patrick does to SpongeBob. Come on, tell me he's not at least a little bit aware of what he was doing. It has Patrick's weird fetish, which I can't explain. I really cannot explain. And this episode, it is just uncomfortable to watch, it's painful, it represents everything that is wrong with ScumBob. And everything that SpongeBob used to be is just wrong and done with, and it's just been regurgitated out of Nickelodeon's disgusting gullet, and it's gotta end, man. It's gotta end. ScumBob is just this undead zombie that just keeps going on. No matter how hard you beg it to stop, it just doesn't. And to think, Nickelodeon turned down Adventure Time. You know, if Nickelodeon gave Adventure Time the treatment it gives SpongeBob... Wait, no. It's a really good thing Nickelodeon didn't get its hands on Adventure Time. Oh god, it's a really good thing. I can't help but wonder, though. When is ScumBob actually going to end? Is it going to end when Tom Kenny leaves or dies or something? Or would they replace him with some other voice actor and just keep the show going and the kids will be none the wiser? I don't know. I don't see a foreseeable end for the show. Nickelodeon has nothing they'd really want to replace it with. Nothing that could be like, you know, this big domination of hits, of views, like a regular show or Adventure Time is for Cartoon Network. Nickelodeon, at least in its own mind, doesn't have anything. Doesn't think it can even give anything a chance. And that's really sad. As for why ScumBob still brings in the ratings that it does, I'm gonna go ahead and throw out my theory. See, I think kids aren't really able to understand the difference between a good episode or a bad episode. And I'm not saying, you know, if the episode's hard, I'm not saying kids don't have any judgmental or critical skills. I'm just saying they love a character like SpongeBob, so they'll love him no matter what's going on. You know, they might have not liked the episode, but because it's SpongeBob, they won't admit that to themselves or anyone else. And I know you're going to be like, well, Pie Guy, you're throwing out BS. This is some psychology crap you're throwing out here. But no, I really believe it, that looking back as a kid, I didn't outwardly admit that an episode of a show was bad. I just kind of thought it, and then I just kind of let the thought pass, because, you know, who was I going to tell? You know, so I still watched the show. I didn't assume that the show was ruined forever. I would tune in next week and hope that it was better, and if it was, then okay. If it wasn't, I'd tune in next week to hope that it was better, because it was a show that I liked, and I kept watching it. So, yeah, there's some kid logic for you, and hey, I could be completely off. Anyway, PIEGUYRULZ, out.